minds with a monarch's voice. Cry havoc! And let slip the dogs of war.
Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Welcome everybody to my SOS, a Call for Healing podcast. I'm your coach, Felicia Coro, and this is my podcast, The Anger Within. Listen, I had to start off this podcast with the 1953 Julius Caesar by Marlon Brando. That scene where he literally screams, "By havoc and let's slip the dogs of war." That was my sentiment entirely when it came to the anger I held within. Now, before we get to it, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I just want to thank everybody for their patience and their love as I upload my videos. There's a lot going on in my life at the moment, positive and some negative, but mainly positive. So what has happened is that I have a very busy schedule. So yes, I'm going to talk about my experience with anger and how I dealt with it and how I grew to understand what was happening within. But what I would say is that I am not speaking about this topic from a professional point of view, but more from a personal point of view. So it's literally a guide to help and encourage anybody who's going through something similar, and to kind of let you know that you're not alone in your journey and in your feelings. So in saying all of that, let's start. So, when I think about the anger I experienced, it was a huge factor in the emotional breakdown I was experiencing midway in my marriage before it all came to an end. I don't know if anger was something that was always inside me laying dormant. Now, when I talk about anger, I'm talking about the extreme end of things where the anger pushes you to be impulsive. The anger pushes you to say things that you know you shouldn't say, to react in ways you shouldn't react in. I don't know if that was something that was always laying dormant inside me. But one thing I would say is that it was something that I didn't recognize to be me as a person, but it became a very dominant fixture, if I can say that, in the ending of the marriage. So let me speak a bit about that, and maybe some of you who are listening can relate to, or may even answer certain questions you may have inside of you. I was filled with anger during the marriage and after when it ended. Now, in the marriage, when I was angry, examples will be, it was just, I was taking a lot of narcissistic bait, if people know what that means. I was being gaslighted a lot. I was being provoked a lot, and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to react to that. So I ended up taking the bait most of the time. The times I didn't take the bait, I would say, was in the earlier part of the breaking down of the marriage, if that makes sense. So I would say probably maybe 2. I was only married for 7 years, so maybe 2 years in, when I was being gaslighted and mistreated. My first port of call was to cry. I used to cry about everything. Oh my goodness. I would cry about absolutely everything, to the point I was even confused of what I was crying about. And when loved ones would see me in this state and they would ask, why are you crying? What is the matter? The only way I could describe it was, I don't feel happy. I don't feel happy. I couldn't verbalize what the feelings was. It's just something didn't feel right and I didn't feel happy. Now, I didn't feel like this 100% of the times. Obviously, there were happy moments, but those were somewhat fleeting, because even though I did feel kind of happy in certain aspects, there was always this running undertone as if it wasn't going to last. There was no comfortability in that happiness. So the crying somewhat evolved to anger, and I would be snappy, I could be moody, I would go silent. And I used to wonder to myself, why do I feel like this? And it was kind of like a safeguarding mechanism that now came into play in trying to safeguard very vulnerable aspects of myself. Now, I later learned the reason why I started to feel this angry in the marriage was because it came from a place of feeling exposed. My ex-husband didn't do a good job of protecting me from the external factors that was influencing our marriage negatively. And as we understand, as believers, of those who believe in the Bible, if you're just learning about the Bible, welcome. But in the Bible, it is mentioned that the man is the spiritual covering of the woman. Now, what does that mean? It means that the man's responsibility is to cover the woman, is to cover her spiritually, is to cover her emotionally, is to cover her physically, whether financial stability, security, emotionally, understanding the needs of his wife. Because we understand through our learning that the marriage is the institution of the Most High. And when two people come together, a man leaves his mother and father, becomes one with his wife, they become one body. And he becomes that physical covering for that woman, for his wife, for his partner. And as much as I am honest, I will say that I didn't understand the concept of him being a spiritual covering at the time, but it does make perfect sense to why I felt exposed. I felt very much exposed to the interference that was coming from family members, more so his family members, and the negative influence they were inputting into our marriage. For example, I won't mention any names, but I will frequently hear comments, especially if they witness my husband being my ex-husband at the time being quite nice to me. I remember there was an incident where he went and asked me if I wanted something to drink. We were visiting his mother's place, and I said, "Yes, please." And he went and got me something to drink, and a comment was made by one of his family members saying, "You shouldn't be too soft with her. You still have to be a man. You can't just accommodate her needs." There's something, just something very anti-marriage. And it's none of their business, mind you. This person was divorced themselves. So, and they made this comment. And the fact that at the time, as a husband, he didn't shut that type of mentality, that comment down. He didn't say anything, to be honest, when it was said. But I guess his silence in that moment spoke volumes, because words are powerful things that can hit your subconscious, be planted there as a seed, and then marinated over time. Because what did happen was he became those words. Because if I'm honest, there was a battle to and fro within my husband to want to do the right thing. And then he always ended up doing the opposite. But we'll go into that, because there is a lot that happened within the marriage, physically and spiritually. So going back to the anger, so that exposure led to feeling betrayal. I felt a sense of betrayal in the aspect of the entire marriage, because there was no loyalty in terms of protection, in terms of how he spoke to me, in terms of how he treated me, in terms of how he treated our children. So this anger started to bubble up inside, and it then came out like a volcano, especially when he now went into abusive mode. I would literally contend back. And, in those moments, I'm sure a lot of you can agree and sympathize and understand that we are not ourselves. We are literally on defense mode, trying to defend ourselves, trying to be in a place where we think we're saving ourselves. But what I found was the more I interacted with the negative, the more broken down I became. So with every exposure, that anger grew. And I'm going to use this word exposure because I was exposed. And I didn't have the spiritual knowledge, the social understanding, to be fair, of how to deal with that. Now, when I say social understanding, just knowing when to leave something alone, just knowing when to pick your battles, knowing when you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to get up and leave the room and kind of end the conversation. I didn't understand that at the time, and it had to take maturity. And I think I can say I didn't have the maturity because I didn't have the understanding. And my mind was just built on protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. And I don't know if that stems from childhood, especially being back at school when I used to get picked on a fair bit, because I'm African, I'm Nigerian, and I went to a school where it was predominantly Asian. But I used to get picked on by West Indian, Jamaican children. They used to mock my name. They used to mock the fact that I was from Africa. And I never used to say anything. I was a very quiet, shy child. I never used to say anything. So this is why I said, was this anger already in me but laying dormant? Because when I used to go through this experience, boy, did I feel anger. Borderline hatred towards those who were being mean to me about where my parents were from, where I was from, and I didn't know how to respond to it. And obviously, in hindsight, the children usually kind of copy what their parents say and do. But as I was exposed, every exposure led to anger. And why was I so angry? So I'm trying to think of an example of when I was really angry. So many. There'll be times that I just didn't find joy in a lot of things. Even if I tried to push myself to find joy, it felt like, goodness me, it wasn't going to last. For example, I noticed, I'm going to speak more about this when I do another podcast in the future about the spiritual aspect of my marriage, because it runs deep and a lot of people may not really understand it, or they'll be like, oh, that's just fictional. But it's true. There's a lot of spiritual elements to this. But for example, we were a family at the time that used to go on holiday a fair bit. Most times every year we'll go on holiday with the children. And I tell you no lies. Anytime we went on holiday, if we went on holiday for a week, middle of that week, Wednesday, or whenever we landed there, I can't just say Wednesday, but in the middle of the week, an argument would start up. And it will come out of nowhere, and he would start the argument. His sense of discourse. And before that, things would be going beautifully. It's like that opportunity to rebuild and heal, and then problem. And he doesn't want to be on the holiday anymore, and he will disappear. Chaos. And this happened without fail every time we went on holiday. And if we were married for 7 years, we probably went on holiday every year during the time we were married. So imagine that. And I started to notice without fail, in the middle of that week, or even if it's 2 weeks, in the middle of the 2 weeks, a problem will start. And it wasn't just, bickering, real arguments that would dislodge everything, which was based on nothing. I couldn't understand what was happening to this person. I would see a transition, a switch in somebody's personality. At one point, it felt like I was faced with something dark. A dark entity had entered. That's the best way to describe it. A dark entity had entered, and the scene had changed and the mood had changed. And it would always bring a downer in on the holiday. And I think that led to a lot of anger as well, because the exposure didn't just build up the anger, but it also exposed a lot of vulnerability. Now, the vulnerability of not feeling protected, the vulnerability of rejection. Every time that incident took place, if I use the example of the holidays, there was a massive feeling of rejection because we couldn't pinpoint. It would literally be, if you're eating on the table or in the restaurant, are you okay? You look a bit sad. That would come from me. Or why are you always, why do I look sad? I'm not feeling sad. You know what? I don't want to be here. It was just based on nothing. I mean, that was a very flimsy example, but I'm just trying to emphasize how pointless an argument was. And clearly it was constructed to bring chaos, because what I realized, I took the bait. Sometimes, there's a time I got so angry. You're always causing problems. And I took the bait and we argued to kingdom come. And in the end, I will get drained. In the end, I will become tired. In the end, I will become depressed. And then what will happen is that I will be taken back to the gaslighting stage. So a lot of vulnerability built up. Rejection, the fear of abandonment. All this made me angry. Fear now crept in. I was angry that I felt fearful. I was angry at the fact that this individual could make me feel this way. I was believing in the threats. My ex-husband was the king of threats. I believed the threats. I believed the words that came out his mouth, even though they weren't based on anything substantial. I believed that I wasn't able to, if he was to leave, I wouldn't move on. I believed that I will be nothing. Every word that he said, even though I retorted back with my own things, but there was a massive vulnerability within me that believed the words that came out of his mouth. And with the vulnerability, the exposure, the fear, the threats, the abuse, that all led to this anger within. And what happened was, it was explosive. I would explode. It didn't take me long to explode. I would scream at the top of my lungs when arguing with him, coming to the later stages of the ending of the marriage, to the point he couldn't get a word in because the way I would scream at the top of my lungs, I would literally shut out every other noise and just hear my own voice triumphing over his. It was horrible. And that also led to the unforgiveness. Now, with this anger within, it led to unforgiveness that he made me feel this way, that I felt vulnerable. And I now started to wish ill on him. I wanted vengeance. You know, coming to the end of the marriage, my ex-husband did a lot of things which stirred that pot of anger. So, for example, he would get his, one of the incidents he did, he got his sister to ambush me on the phone, to verbally attack me. And the anger I showed, oh boy, once again screaming at the top of my lungs to the point she couldn't hear herself speak. He would do things to literally break me down. He would do things to chip away at my confidence, to chip away at my ability of surviving without him. He would literally use terms such as, we're going to war, me and you. He would try and plant this seed of just wickedness. You know, I remember a time when he had left, and I was with the children. Now, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but I have 3 beautiful girls, and the second, my second eldest girl, she started to experience a lot of sicknesses when she was younger, which led to a diagnosis of autism. And she used to suffer from convulsions, which she does not anymore. Praise be to the Most High. And in that period, especially the time he left, she was experiencing it. And I felt like I was faced with somebody else. I was no longer faced with the narcissistic, abusive husband. I was faced with someone darker than that, who didn't care what my daughter was experiencing, who couldn't see or didn't care what I was experiencing through my daughter. He became this whole different entity once he stepped out of this house, and it was something that was incredibly dark. Now, in saying that, because I didn't know that the actual weapon to this warfare I was in, because it was a spiritual warfare, was prayer, was reverence to the Most High. Instead, what did I do? I got more angry. I allowed that spirit of anger to now brew up in me to be some type of wall to safeguard and protect me from the attacks, the spiritual attacks that I was going through. Now, how did I learn to quench the fire within? Now, there is no magic remedy to this, because sometimes today, I wouldn't say I get angry, but I do get a bit frustrated. That anger within is quenched, if I'm honest, because he no longer has that power to impact me. So it's about taking your power back. It's about understanding who you are. It was about understanding who I was. And it was through the grace of the Most High and actually going into reverence with him that I learned slowly how to quench that anger. And that was to regain my power through the understanding of who I was. Now, listen, some people will be like, I thought we were going to go on a technical point. I am I am a life coach, but I will speak from a spiritual stance, because it was the spiritual that got me to this point, that helped me through my journey of healing. I can't ignore that. So I'm going to go into the spiritual aspect here. So I want you guys to hold on. Those who are new to it, please hold on. It will help you. So when I now started to learn more about my faith, started to learn more about the Most High, started to do basic principles such as praying, fasting, and committing myself to our Heavenly Father, I now started to see rapid change within me. Now, let me tell you, there were times where people who are not, people were placed around me to aggravate, to kind of prod, to see if that anger was still there. And all praises to the Most High, it wasn't. But I found that I still got frustrated. I think that's a human thing. You're going to get frustrated. But not to digress, in regards to my ex-husband, I recently noticed that I have a lot of repressed memories. And I think a lot of these repressed memories happen to protect myself from becoming angry. I noticed that when I say repressed, I don't know, I wouldn't say I had forgotten what had happened, but it has laid down so low that it will take a lot for that memory to come back again, because I'm in such a better and healthier place. But nevertheless, the repressed memories, I believe, are a protection in preventing anger from rising again. Because the Bible says, be angry, but do not sin. My anger was leading me into sinning, into saying things that were despicable to him in order to hurt, in order to break, in behaving in ways which was detrimental to myself and detrimental to my emotional and mental well-being. So I was sinning with the anger that was within me. So now, through engaging in scripture that speaks about peace, that speaks about healing, by surrounding myself with people who have gone through the journey, and you can see that there is a restoration in them, there is a light within them, I was able to heal through that. I was able to heal through understanding who I was as an individual. The anger spiraled out of control because I didn't know who I was. I didn't understand my value. I didn't believe I was good enough. Now, this not being good enough didn't just come from being in the marriage to my ex-husband. I realized it came through childhood. I always thought I wasn't good enough, even if I had proved to be the best at something. So, with that being said, this anger was always there. It just needed I won't say the right ingredients, but it just needed the components to make it erupt, and it erupted. And repressed memories, haven't forgotten, but still there. Learning to forgive myself were all the steps that I took in order to repress the anger and for it to be quenched. It's so important to know who you are, to learn to know who you are. When we look in the mirror, what do we actually see? Right? And I had to look in the mirror and I had to ask myself, what do I see? And all this for me was part of my healing. Now, I've already spoken for nearly 30 minutes, and let me tell you, I can speak more. I'll probably do a part 2 to the anger within. But the key points I would like everyone to take away was that exposure led to the buildup of anger, vulnerability, not feeling protected, fear, believing in the threats, absorbing the abuse, that I was put through, feeling a lot of betrayal. This what led to the anger growing inside me. And it has all been reversed. Now, if you feel like, I don't really feel, if you can relate to what I've said and you say, oh, I don't really feel angry anymore. But anytime I see the individual or hear the individual voice, I feel anger. What do I do about that? Well, you have to be kind to yourself and understand that this person caused trauma. Okay. What I spoke about quite briefly, because it's difficult to talk about 7 years in 30 minutes. And sometimes I do think I'm still going through repressed memories, trying to remember what really happened. But what I went through was traumatic. It was something that was a shockwave to the system, the emotional, the mental, the verbal, the physical, the abuse. It was a shockwave to the system because I've never experienced it before. So as much as for me, my faith, the Bible, the belief in a heavenly creator and his son has transformed me, there are still elements of me that would still probably get a tiny bit triggered if I was to see or hear the person again, but not in the same extent than before. If anything, it's understanding the power I now have, that I can no longer give my autonomy away to this individual. So as a person, it's about you understanding who you are, growing in that understanding. Even if you're still a bit confused today, grow in the understanding of who am I really? And be kind to yourself. What is the reality of that person? What is the reality of your feelings and the stage you are in now with healing? A lot of people have gone through traumatic events, whether in family life, in church life, whatever the case is. And those events have left bitter tastes in their mouth. But the taste within time will start to disappear, because we now go through the process of really asking ourselves, what is the reality? Who am I as an individual? And then that would lead you on a beautiful road to understanding forgiveness, understanding letting go. But I think it's also key to understand the underlining of what the anger was. For me, it was vulnerability. It was feeling exposed. It was fear. So once we have an understanding of what is the undercurrent, why am I so angry? Yes, I'm angry at what he said to me. Yes, I'm angry at what she said to me. Yes, I'm angry at the way she treated me. Yes, I'm angry at the way he embarrassed me. But what is the underlining of that fiery anger that just makes you explode, that makes you irrational, that makes you act out? So I hope I've made that clear enough. Please, if there's anything you'd like me to discuss more on, feel free to put it in the comments below. But I hope this helps. And if requested, I could make a more detailed part 2 on the anger within. But once again, I want to thank you guys for being so patient with me. I am your coach, Felicia Okora, and I'll see you next time.